各位乡亲、各位朋友，大家好，大家好，欢迎收看前锋政治台，我是Samuel Lee。洛杉矶39选区的选出来的众议员 Ed Royce， 在我们国家的众议院服务多年，他现在是众议院外交委员会的leader， 一个 head 最近呢，他是在美国传统基金会由韩国三星集团所资助的李秉吉的一个讲座呢。它里面有一个发表他的言论，我们从《自由时报》曹一芬小姐的报道可以了解大概的情形，但是很精彩的部分呢，也相当多部分也遗漏掉，尤其呢 Ed Royce 把美国在印度的利益这方面讲得非常的清楚，这个 Ed Royce 先生呢，他对于说这个 international students， 他毫不含糊的说出说台湾 students Taiwanese students 还有 Chinese student， 他是很清楚的把学生的国家都讲得出来。
In my congressional district, for example, we have Chinese Americans, Taiwanese Americans, Korean Americans, Filipino Americans. In fact, there are 95 countries of origin represented within the 39th congressional district.
所以我相信在洛杉矶支持 Ed Royce 的我们台美乡亲朋友，听了这个报道以后呢，会对自己所选出来的人觉得很欣慰。
Will firmly anchor Taiwan into the global trading system. Mind, the United States must not shy away from including Taiwan into the broader international trading regime. For far too long, the discussion about Taiwan has been dominated by arms sales. This myopic approach to an island of 23 million people, which boasts a world-class manufacturing sector, is sadly inadequate. Taiwan is a robust democracy with a strong commitment to human rights, to free speech, to free markets. So let's complete the U.S.-Taiwan Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, and then in short order, let's begin negotiations towards a bilateral investment treaty. After that, it's onward to a U.S.-Taiwan Free Trade Agreement.
以下我们就来看看对不起，应该说听听，因为这没有影像我们是干稿我们是只有他的 MP3 的录音稿我们从华盛顿吴先生那边拿到这个 download 下来这个，请大家来仔细聆听一下 Ed Royce 在整个讲座中他讲了哪些事情呢？我们一下来好好的聆听。
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, Ambassador Choi, Marie, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I think I should begin by telling you that Ambassador Choi and I were recently in California, and we were there with veterans of the Korean War. And there is indeed a unique bond that exists between veterans and those that they fought so bravely to protect. And we saw that bond there that day. And it is a reminder of the special relationship that exists between our countries that goes back some 60 years. But it is also a reminder that as that relationship has matured, so has South Korea evolved. If we remember the situation after the devastation of the war, everything was in ashes. You see those photographs brought back by those GIs that show the absolute destruction that was on that peninsula. And today, as you go back to Seoul and you behold what has come to pass, it is phenomenal that at this 60th anniversary and at this one-year anniversary, frankly, of our chorus legislation which I co-authored, we are looking at a Korea that I think would have been unimaginable to that generation, to those men who accepted those awards from you that day, Ambassador Choi. And you think about some of this spirit and about B.C. Lee. He was so well known for what they call his pioneering spirit. His willingness to commit to new markets even when their potential was not readily apparent. It was his willingness to take risks that propelled Samsung and propelled South Korea to the highest level of innovation and of success. And that indeed is the foundation of capitalism itself, this this entrepreneurial risk-taking and the ability to receive that reward, to take those risks and thus engender that type of growth. And I believe that B.C. Lee would agree that the enduring legacy of America's commitment to the Asia-Pacific region is without a doubt the long-term economic prosperity that is at the heart of this dynamic evolution that we see in Asia. America's contribution to Asia's growth has been overwhelmingly positive, and a big part of it was the free market and open trading system that the U.S. helped build after the war. As a result, many Asian countries have enjoyed unprecedented prosperity, and so has the United States. Our nation is, after all, a Pacific power. For those of us in California, Asia is not the Far East. For us, it's the Near West. And none of the prosperity would have been possible without the stability that America's security umbrella brought to Asia. But what has been the norm for generations is now starting to change. Perhaps the catalyst of this change is the perception, either rightly or wrongly, that the balance of power in Asia is undergoing a once-in-a-lifetime transformation. What we are seeing is that Asia's collective attention is gradually shifting away from economic prosperity to instead security concerns. Where nations used to focus on trade and commerce, now they discuss nationalism, military budgets, and even provocative behavior. Look no further than the territorial disputes in the East China and South China Seas as prime examples. For these reasons, we must shift away from the old approach, which unnecessarily divided the region and separated economic engagement from our political engagement. The old way of doing business is not only cumbersome, but it is becoming less relevant. We must somehow find a way to reinvigorate our engagement of Asia, not for fear that we may be left out, but rather we must engage so that we can once again move the focus squarely back to economic prosperity. This notable shift in focus from trade to nationalism frankly worries me. And that's why I believe there must be some urgency to this. We've seen the alternative before. There are no winners in arms races. I selected Asia as the destination of my first overseas trip to send an unmistakable message that the region is critically important to the United States. I was heartened by the warm welcome that my ranking member and I received in Japan and in Taiwan, in the Philippines, in China, and in South Korea. During our visit, 3 issues dominated our discussions: North Korea, territorial disputes, and economic prosperity. The region has changed so much that the old way of doing business will not help us achieve our objective in the future. A fundamental restructuring of U.S. involvement in the Asia-Pacific will resolve the endless standoff with North Korea for once and for all. India will no longer be artificially separated from the rest of Asia, and we will firmly anchor Taiwan into the global trading system. The U.S. must take an in-depth look at its relationship with China and find a balanced approach that takes into account America's interests while striving for a productive relationship. Finally, we must once again make America the most attractive location to do business for the Asia-Pacific region. Let's get the conversation back on to economic prosperity and away from divisive nationalism. America's North Korea policy has been a failure by all measures, and I will share with you that that includes Democratic and Republican administrations. Our inability to bring about real change inside North Korea has resulted in a region that is more insecure today than it was during the '94 Framework Agreement, when that agreement promised a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. That approach has not worked. Earlier this month, I called a hearing examining policy options for imposing a different approach, an approach that, frankly, we tried in 2005. And that approach was the approach with the Banco Delta Asia and the sanctions we placed on the financial system. I plan to introduce bipartisan legislation in the next few weeks with the ranking member to target North Korea's access to hard currency via its many illicit activities and use of foreign banks. And the reason for this is because the most expensive defense strategy is a nuclear weapons program. In terms of items in the budget, the cost in hard currency to develop this and maintain this, it is absolutely overwhelming. And when I spoke to defectors who had been part of the weapons system, of the missile system, they told me that when that was deployed in 2005, 2006, they could not get parts. They had to close down the production line. There wasn't the hard currency for the regime to pay its generals or certainly to run that program. It is time that we thought long-term. If we do nothing, then it's almost a guarantee that North Korea will develop a nuclear warhead. It will shrink that warhead, it will place it on the top of an ICBM, and at that point it will plunge Northeast Asia into an open arms race. And the costs of that are going to be extraordinary. Looking towards South Asia, it behooves the U.S. to encourage better integration of India into the Asia-Pacific's broader economic trading system. We must include India not as a counterbalance to China, but because it makes economic sense. Indeed, many have advocated a larger role for India, but few have articulated why this greater role is in India's own self-interest. And this is simple: economic prosperity. India is the world's largest democracy. It will soon be one of the world's largest economies. Its involvement in Asia will be a welcome addition. The U.S. must work with India to reduce her domestic constraints to growth and increase foreign direct investment, reducing red tape, increasing the supply of electricity, improving the tax system, strengthening the ability to enforce contracts will all lift India's ranking and spur business growth in a way that has been missing thus far. Since Asia's economy is largely based on global supply chains, it is absolutely critical for India to enact reforms, to liberalize its economy, to tap into this regional market. This is how India anchors itself in the Asia-Pacific region, and we should do what we can to help leverage those reforms inside India. That is why I believe the administration must redouble its efforts to secure a U.S.-India bilateral investment treaty. Current negotiations are proceeding far too slowly. There are important issues to resolve, and it's going to take a concerted effort to make progress, but once the BIT is firmly in place, the U.S. should work with India on a free trade agreement that will foster more trade. We should also work with India on high-tech visas, where both of our countries jointly benefit. I strongly believe that where goods and services cross borders, armies do not. If this isn't motivation enough, let's consider the fact that of the $11 trillion in new wealth that is going to be generated worldwide over the next 5 years, half of that amount is going to be in Asia. With this in mind, the United States must not shy away from including Taiwan into the broader international trading regime. For far too long, the discussion about Taiwan has been dominated by arms sales. This myopic approach to an island of 23 million people, which boasts a world-class manufacturing sector, is sadly inadequate. Taiwan is a robust democracy with a strong commitment to human rights, to free speech, to free markets. So let's complete the U.S.-Taiwan Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, and then in short order, let's begin negotiations towards a bilateral investment treaty. After that, it's onward to a U.S.-Taiwan Free Trade Agreement. China's rise cannot be ignored, but it also does not need to be our collective obsession as well. The U.S. must engage China and seek a more productive relationship because it's really in our best interest to make this relationship work. All the concerns about China, whether they are trade disputes or human rights, will never fully go away. But to choose a path of contentiousness really limits what we are able to achieve. When it comes to China, it's likely that we will continue to have disagreements. Regardless of the issue, we have to keep talking and maintain open lines of communications. That is why I'm a strong advocate for increasing military-to-military exchanges between our two countries. Unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't have quite the economic influence in Asia it once had to drive this agenda. The center of economic activity within Asia has shifted gradually away from the U.S. to China. Intra-regional trade between China and Southeast Asia has also grown tremendously. Trade between China and Australia has grown. Even Japan is now more focused on the Chinese market than the American market. And while I fully support Japan's expressed interest to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that TPP free trade agreement alone cannot reverse this trend. If the U.S. is going to remain an economic leader in Asia, if we are going to succeed, we need to get better at home. To do that, we must make the most of our human resources, and that requires better education here in the United States. We need more students studying math and studying science. And we must fully embrace the rich diversity of Asian Americans. In my congressional district, for example, we have Chinese Americans, Taiwanese Americans, Korean Americans, Filipino Americans. In fact, there are 95 countries of origin represented within the 39th Congressional District. I've long consulted with my constituents to better understand developments abroad, and many of my constituents are active in trading and investing in Asia, which is a source of our national wealth. Last Congress, I sponsored legislation to make it easier for state universities in California to teach strategic languages, such as Chinese, so that our students are better equipped to do business and conduct diplomacy overseas. I'm a strong advocate for increasing the number of visas for foreigners who receive advanced degrees in critical science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. In the U.S., 76% of all registered patents from the top 10% producing universities, they come from foreign students here in the U.S., who then become inventors. These foreign-born inventors are driving economic prosperity with the consequences of their background in these hard sciences. In our current system, we welcome foreign students to the United States. We provide them the world's best education, and then we send them home so that they can compete against us, and frankly, this makes no sense. America's current involvement in Asia must not be confined by the same old approaches that may have once served a purpose, but are now woefully out of date. Indeed, we must harness the full potential of American ingenuity to address the spectrum of challenges we have before us. And this is how B.C. Lee built Samsung in the aftermath of the Korean War. And much like the mythical phoenix rising from the ashes, South Korea and Samsung are today truly world-class. Together, we can ensure that the future legacy of America's engagement in the Asia-Pacific region is focused on mutual economic prosperity. That's the focus which I bring and which I'm suggesting to you, and I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
各位乡亲、各位朋友，尤其是支持 Ed Royce 的乡亲朋友，你听了他的讲座演讲以后，会不会觉得蛮高兴的？是的，那我们今天的努力就是为了呈现他所做的表现，希望大家会觉得满意。我们下次再会。